thus in terms of the entity of the primeval basic mode of abiding. In that paragraph, the word wondering appears. That just means thinking about. The Tibetan word is just samba, which is thinking about. And maybe for the sake of consistency, I should just say thinking about, but I'm not ready to change it to thinking about. At the double equal sign below Khetsun Sangpo's remarks, would that begin with both cyclic existence and nirvana? Well, there's something I want to talk about when I'm just waiting for the opportunity. But once I said both cyclic existence and nirvana, and he's talking about he and the book, and at the point of the double equal sign, it says at a time of non-fluctuation from the basis. Wow. It must be expressed that these, have to add in these to the text, but there's nothing else. Abide is the mere great emptiness and luminosity devoid of all limits. Devoid of this and that, good and bad, and so forth, as Khetsun Sangpo is about to say. But it's not just emptiness, it's emptiness and luminosity. And for some people, indeed, when you search for the object of negation, whether you're practicing Gelug, when you search for something that inherently exists, or whether you're practicing Nyingma, and you're using middle way reasoning, when you search for the object of negation and you don't find it, and you're left with a mere blank, really, a mere absence, for some people, there's, I'm trying to think, what is it? A mere vacuity. For some people, also, there's a luminosity that appears, which should not then become a distraction. Whether the luminosity appears or not, one is to stay with the also then, if the luminosity appears, stay also with this absence of inherent existence. One isn't to lose the message and say, "Oh, marvelous luminosity," and then forget what you were looking for inherent existence. And then if you forgot about the absence of inherent existence that you found means realize. You found the non-finding of inherent existence. So you realize something. So if you lost that realization and just paid attention to the luminosity, that would be pathetic. But if that luminosity itself was, so to speak, endowed with the absence of inherent existence, well, that would be marvelous. And that's how the Dalai Lama reads the Nyingma combination of emptiness and luminosity. It's not luminosity devoid of emptiness, just as in Nyingma, emptiness is not devoid of luminosity. It's not luminosity devoid of the emptiness of inherent existence. It's not mere luminosity. There are all sorts of luminosities. And you could say, when you get to that level of luminosity, it is together with, or it could never be separate from, an absence of inherent existence. It's not a matter of two things coming together. It could never be separate from an absence of inherent existence. Dutrel, me. Du is coming together. Tel is separating. Me is without a coming together or separating. That's Nyingma language. Dutrel, me. So now, at a time of the non-fluctuation of the basis, there ain't no Buddhas and no sentient beings. Now, if we think in terms of Gelug, is there any time when you, I don't mean you with your specific name or your specific gender or your specific, or me qualified by being Jeffrey Hopkins, but, what's called the mere I that travels from lifetime to lifetime. But that doesn't mean it's it's what travels from lifetime to lifetime. And what I'm trying to say, it's not nothing. It's the continuity. Is there any time when, prior to now, it wasn't traveling in cyclic existence? In Gelug? No, it always was. It always was. So you see, we're getting a very different whatever you want to call it, mythology. Mythology makes it sound as if it didn't exist. Phony cosmology or phony history, or it's not phony history, this mythology. It's Nyingma history, it's Nyingma cosmology, it's the Nyingma story. So this is a radically different, early story. And not to put it down, but this is not 5,000 years ago. This is, this is not 50,000 years ago. This is, the way when I was in Japan at the invitation of a certain what was the sutra I was talking about last time? Lotus Sutra group. This is, so far back, the way they were putting it is like you can't even think about it. I got the feeling they didn't want to think about it, but, you can think about it. Because it appears that that it's in the book. I didn't go look it up, but you know, I then began, of course, asking questions. Well, I don't want to embarrass you, but and then, you know, there is a story. And in Nyingma, there is a story. And actually, I was thinking this morning, just a few minutes ago, you could look it up probably in Wiki. I really have to sift through my memory because it's something that I didn't pay much attention to. I'd listened to it. And there's some huge, like, what comes to mind is Kanchen-so. I don't know what that is in Sanskrit. Huge Buddha, like it. You know, I don't want to say Buddha in the sky, but it's sort of like that. But it's not like up there. It's, you know, there's the story would be very interesting for us to look up now that we've gotten into this. I've never been in a position where although I've taught some Nyingma text at the University of Virginia, this has never come up. And I've translated for Khetsun Sangpo in a few courses at the University of Virginia. So, contrastingly, in Gelug, there's no beginning to cyclic existence, number one, and there's no beginning to your cyclic existence and my cyclic existence. And there's no time when you weren't around traveling in cyclic existence. There will be a time when you're not in cyclic existence. And then there's a sticky question that's debated in the perfection of wisdom studies. Is there a time when there'll be no sentient being in cyclic existence? We're gradually reducing in number one by one. Sentient beings are susceptible to liberation and are being liberated one by one from cyclic existence. Thus, will there be a time when all sentient beings will have been liberated? And then you think, well, if they debate this, what is the problem? Well, will there be a time when there is no complete enjoyment body? Complete enjoyment bodies appear in order to help sentient beings, but specifically, you know, high-level bodhisattvas. Are the bodhisattvas going to run out and all become Buddhas? And I don't know why it's worded as complete enjoyment bodies. Why not word it as, will there be a time when there are no more emanation bodies? I gave the debate as I know it. It's complete enjoyment bodies. But if I wanted to simplify it to make it easier for me to understand it, I would have said, will there be a time when there are no more emanation bodies? Please. If there are, then there'll be a time when Buddha bodies, there won't be 3 Buddha bodies. And that's supposed to be impossible. Now, if the number of sentient beings is limitless, then, okay, can a limitless, you know, blah, blah, blah. Can a limitless number of beings be reduced one by one? Okay, let's get back to the text. How many angels can fit on the head of a pin? Probably depends on the type of bodies that they have. Okay. Now, also, the example that's being used here, meditative equipoise on emptiness. If we ask in Gelug, if so-and-so, let's say Khetsun Sangpo, whose picture is right here that you can't see, but this audience over here can see. The filming is from this direction, so they can see Khetsun Sangpo, and they can see not on LinkedIn. So we'll ask him on LinkedIn, right? So if somebody is in according to Gelug, in direct perception of emptiness, does that mean that everybody else is obliterated and non-existent?
No.
Just because they're not appearing to the person in meditative equipoise on emptiness? Now you see, in the time, you see, the basis time, it says sentient beings and Buddhas don't exist. That's a very, the example and the exemplified. Always you have to figure out with an example, meditative equipoise in Nyingma, this example is in Nyingma, you have to figure out what qualities of the example are to be brought over to the exemplified. In meditative equipoise in Nyingma, they don't claim that everybody else is non-existent also. But in terms of the exemplified, at the time of the basis, that's in historical time, even if it's way, 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 way back there. That's before sentient beings and Buddhas existed. So also, there was a time when Buddhas didn't exist. Way, 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 way. How far back is it? Do they postulate how far back is it?
Then what do they explain as the causes for Buddhists?
No, that's an interesting point. Because we're going to get in a lot of trouble. Because it's karmic winds that stir the basis. And where did that karma come from?
Yeah.
Oh, we got a lot of questions. The karmic winds. Now there's two types of winds, Khetsun Sangpo is going to say, somewhere down. One is karmic and the other is some sort of pure wind. But these aren't pure winds. The text itself and he also say it's karmic winds. Now in Gelug, when you have cycles, there's a formation of a world system, and which is called, there are 20 empty great aeons. And, during that period, the world system is forming, and sentient beings aren't there. But you see, there are world systems somewhere else, where there are sentient beings, and there's karma. And as His Holiness said one day when John Avedon was interviewing him, and His Holiness was sitting, there were window seats on the two sides of the window, and it was raining, and he was talking about the raindrops falling on the windows, and that the rain would have been caused by, the previous karma of the sentient beings in that area. But he said, I doubt that the raindrops falling in specific places on the windows would have been caused by the karma, but the rain itself would have been. And he said our meeting there, the three of us meeting there, would have been, this karma is acting on some other systems, formation of, effects now. It's serving as karmas now. Okay, so we need to find somebody who would want to talk about this. Or just as we have all along, go with, just remembering our issues. Then we can pass on to the next, to where we are today.
Can I just ask, please?
Please.
With regards to this example that you gave, that His Holiness was observing the raindrops.
Yes.
And said this, but in Nyingma it would be, if I understand this, Rikpa and Rikpa said, then this is individual. Each drop would be individual, would be caused by individual's karma, or not?
Ooh. Well, everything that appears within the realm of the effervescence of Rikpa. All appearance, there's no way of getting around saying that all appearance is within the effervescence of intrinsic awareness. I think maybe I should just leave it at that. It'll make life easier for me. I mean, all sorts of things are going through my mind, like, don't bother yourself with that question. In a practical sense. In another sense, I'm thinking, well, how would it be in mind only? The fact, shall we talk about the factor that appears to your mind and the factor that appears to my mind, right? And the example of two people sleeping in the same room and both dream of an elephant. And when they wake in the morning, and both of them talk about dreaming of the elephant. But, it's how satisfying is that or not? But that we both have predispositions for similar appearances. We're talking in mind only, even within Gelug, even within how Gelug presents mind only. And then I've often reflected on, within an external world system like the consequence school in Gelug, how much coordination you and I have to have of predispositions in order for us to be able to talk, in order for us to pass the bread to each other, to turn on the computers, at a similar time on other sides of this planet, for us to be able to talk, how much coordination there is on the level of, mentalisms, despite the external world, and buying the computers at stores and all this and that, the tremendous amount of internalisms that we have to share for us to communicate as much as we do, despite the amount that we don't, despite our intentions on both sides to communicate well. How much we do, how much we don't. As His Holiness said one day to a group of, shall we say, high-level scholars in his meeting room in the private office, there was a teaching which I fortunately attended in the 70s. Highest Yoga Tantras, you may have heard me say this before, more mind only than mind only is. And you could say that really here about Dzogchen appears to be more mind only than mind only. Once everything is the effervescence of Rigpa, and the effervescence is to be seen as Rigpa. Even if the hands come like this is a technique so that you see this as this. See the waves as water. And because we are so addicted to seeing waves as really as non-water, as just waves, and get all caught up in taking pictures of the differences between waves, and then go right on them in absolute addiction, I guess. Khetsun Sangpo has, in preparation for my talk on Thursday, I was reading number 1, his biography of Mipam, which is at the beginning of that book, Fundamental, whatever it's called. Is it called Fundamental Mind?
Yes. Fundamental Mind.
And the beginning is talking about what a fantastic mind he had ever since childhood, and he was able to memorize and then understand books very, very quickly. And then the end of that chapter just brought tears to my eyes. It's just the end of his life, and his what he did when he knew he was dying, and the advice he gave. And then at the end of the first chapter in that book, the first chapter, there's a lot of stuff in it and so forth, but the end of the first chapter, I believe it's the end of the first chapter, Khetsun Sangpo gives a, you could call it a pep talk. And wow, it's a powerful pep talk. anyway. Yeah. Yes.
Rather than reading this paragraph that starts with atomic fluctuation,
Yes.
rather than reading that as some mythical beginning, I'm looking at it and saying, well, at a time when the consciousness is not fluctuating from the basis.
Yes, and I think that's a good way to read it. I read it both ways. And the way I take it, the way I get the most out of it is not talking about the mythical time, but about, like when I wake up in the morning or when my mind calms down, when my mind is not involved, or as a call to not allowing the fluctuation. And, of what my mind would be like, and letting the talk about there being no Buddhas and no sentient being wandering in cyclic existence, of letting that be like a hint of what the mind is when when it's more like a state of meditative equipoise, of being somewhat free from the usual addictions to desire, hatred, and so forth. So, before karmic winds bring about basal appearances, a few lines down, which and thus it, in the book, what Mipam-gyatsho calls it, before the basis is disturbed by karmic winds. You see that 5 or 6 lines down. Since this is the basic mode of abiding of the body of attributes, it is the noumenal emptiness of inherent existence or true existence, and furthermore the self-effulgent luminosity. Now, why is this luminosity called self-effulgent? Naturally effulgent. It is, it has the capacity of all sorts of appearances. And so that's why, in terms of those 3 qualities of natural purity and a nature of spontaneity, that spontaneity comes from the self-effulgent luminosity. So, in its own luminous state, all of these proliferations of good, bad, and so forth are absent. And so, this is our basic or primeval. You see the sense of time, but primeval points to our most inner nature. And so you see why His Holiness calls the fundamental innate mind of clear light the innermost mind, primeval. So, this is good vocabulary. Ye tok. Tok means beginning. Ye tok means primordial. Primordial beginning, then, comes out in English as primeval. Both sentient beings and Buddhas have not arisen. If we look into our the fundamental innate mind of clear light, the clear light nature of the mind, you know, the word you know, I use you know all over the place. There's not a sentient being sitting there. You know, I myself as a sentient being, when you look into that clear light nature of the mind, there's not a sentient being there. You know, we're not talking mythic history. We're talking about the present status of our mind. Then, so the pure qualities of the body of attributes, this what we've often called the truth body, but the name, the Dharmakaya, it's a body. Body means collection of attributes. But in that sort of a state, in this pure nature of the mind, they all have one taste. What is that taste? It's this single taste of purity, of the emptiness of inherent existence and of luminosity. The luminous absence of inherent existence, you know, in Nyingma vocabulary. But at least the absence of inherent existence in Gelug, and the luminous, you can say, absence of inherent existence in Nyingma. So when you directly realize this, if you're totally within it, as in Ngawang Langden's example of water and water, directly realizing it, there's no agent to make a differentiation of this is this, that is that. You know, and the longu, the body of complete enjoyment is bigger. You know, this one's in the east, that one's in the west. They're inconceivable means there's no agent of thinking that's going to think all these things out. There's just luminosity, luminous absence of inherent existence. You see, it's not that nothing can be said. Something can be said, but nobody's saying it at that time. As Tsongkhapa says, it is expressible, but it's not expressible exactly in the manner in which it is experienced in direct perception. It's actually somewhat funny to me. It said, who can express the manner in which a bird flies through the sky? And I think, yeah, you can. It flew from here, and it flew over there. What he's thinking is, you know, it doesn't leave any tracks in the sky. You know, like somebody walking through, like the Indians in this continent can follow the tracks of somebody walking through the forest, because they, you know, bends and breaks down the grass and twigs and so forth. There's no grass and twigs, and you know, even if it, you can't point out tracks in the sky. So you can say it's like the tracks of a bird through the sky. There ain't none. In Gelug, in direct perception of emptiness, you do have the omnipresent mental factors. And an important thing is you're realizing emptiness. You understand emptiness. But like I'm pointing my finger, like you're understanding something, but it's not like that. In this water experience, you do realize something. But that realization, non-dual realization, you see, as soon as we think of realize, it's realizing this, realizing
Yeah, right. So
this, you see? Realizing this. So you see, some systems don't like to call it realize. They like to say there's not even realization. And so from a Gelug point of view, it looks as if it's dumb. Like you come out of it and it's like the guy I was meditating with on that island that's not Long Island, but the other littler island. And we went to this Tibetan monastery and he fell asleep. And afterwards I said, how was your meditation? He said, it was great. It was great. He actually fell asleep. Because he was sitting there, but he said it was great. I said, what it's like? He said, I got no idea. It was great. Like you're conked out. But you see, when you realize the absence of inherent existence, that realization carries over, has tremendous impact, because you've realized something. Shrine Sheba has a great Dokshuki Dokpa. Dokshuki Dokpa. Realized through the force of realization afterwards. Realized through the force of realization, which is not implicit realization. I'm looking at the time. Realized through the force of realization. So some systems don't like to call it realization. Now, in Nyingma, in direct realization of emptiness, this meditative equipoise on emptiness, there is no mind and no mental factors. When pristine wisdom is there, mind and mental factors have disappeared.
But that's because they define Sem quite differently when you're saying mind. And
Correct.
what we're thinking of.
Mind in this context is different from pristine wisdom. Mind is going to be mistaken mind. Now, it doesn't mean the word mind isn't used, meaning something else. The word mind appears, sem appears, but then it's explained away as meaning something else. But in the division, when you talk about mind and mental factors, it means something else. And then even in Buddhahood, the various types of minds, a Buddha has an eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness, has all of them, but they're all cross-functional. They're all cross-functional. So in one way, you want to say, well, then why do you bother to call it a body consciousness if it sees and hears and smells and, you see, they're keeping the six consciousnesses, but they're having them do everything. And even the hair realizes all phenomena. And even the walls of the mandala realize all phenomena. And then if you don't throw up with amazement, you then settle in and see, these systems are not so different, probably. And then you start figuring out how they're not so different, and you begin keeping the systems separate, but see how they have different beginning points. At certain points they're different, and because they're different, they go down different explanatory paths and get different advantages because of it. And then you see them as helpful because they have different systems of explanation. Like having different restaurants give you different, proteins and different vegetables, and keep you from being bored, but also make you fed up as hell. Very now and then. Not that I would be. Yeah. So I guess we have reached. I shouldn't leave it on that note. For example, maybe the beginning of this sentence should be at the end. What is a learner superior's mode of abiding in meditative equipoise? We talked about this, right? So it's important to realize that in both Nyingma and in Gelug, nobody's claiming that everybody else is non-existent. However, from your point of view, if you're in meditative equipoise, or if you're dying, everybody else has disappeared. And even if you're meditating on the dissolution of the elements, you're like the monarch of the universe. And everything else, the whole universe disappears. You're at the center. His Holiness said this one day. And everything else disappears according to your meditation. Everything else. So you see, we often put like the main emphasis, the dominant perspective out there. And put down the egotistical maniacs who put themselves as the center of everything. And of course, Jeffrey, egotistical maniac, should be put down. But there's a certain time and place where really you're not an egotistical maniac, because you have to realize that you go through states during the day where that happens, where everything disappears. As you go to sleep, right? And when you end a dream, when you sneeze, through all sorts of states. And we have to recognize this. And also when somebody else is dying, and you don't go into them and scream at them like, oh, you don't even recognize me anymore. You're such a son of a bitch. And bother them with the fact that they're not recognizing you. Good day. See you next week.